Okay, so let's get right into it. A little bit of music to get us jamming and rolling. Here's the thing that you need to know. Basically, we're going to be going over essentially those things that might be a hat tip or are definitively those things, which would equate to the SSA handing your claim over to essentially the CDI units of the SSA OIG division. Now, some of you don't know what that is. Quick summary on what it is. If the SSA is investigating you, they're going to use what's called Office of Inspector General. Office of Inspector General sends it down to a CDI unit to go ahead and investigate you. When they do that, somebody might be following you around, and that's how it works. Now, this is not a video to create fear. It's a video to create understanding and learning. Let's get into it real quick. Here are some of the things that you need to know that would be very strong signs that there's likely somebody actually looking into your file deeper than a traditional Social Security review. Now, remember, this is not just for SSDI benefits or SSI benefits. This can also happen for retirement benefits as well. So remember, it can happen to any program that's under the SS or the Social Security umbrella, and that includes all kinds of things: retirement, disability, SSI, etc. So let's get into it. Please remember to like and subscribe. Don't forget to hit that like button. Let's get into it real quick. So the first thing I want to talk about is where the SSA reaches out and asks you about your travel history. Now, some people, this is going to seem a little bit odd because, basically they've always lived in the United States and they haven't really traveled places. Some people, this is going to make sense. They've lived outside of the country for a very, very long time, and it makes sense. But the bottom line is, if they're asking about recent vacations, places you've been, cruises you've been on, if they ask you about the last time you've been out of the state, the last time you've been out of the country, beyond just the regular forms where they're trying to figure out more information about where you're going, this does tend to happen when essentially you have an individual that's constantly traveling, yet also is claiming disability benefits. What they're starting to get a little bit smarter about at the SSA, and I mean, they've always been smart about it, but they're getting more aggressive with it, is tracking down a lot of the people who move out of the United States and finding the jobs that they're working at that's basically under the table. Because I'm getting calls to do these 1 hour private sessions where people are noticing things that they've never noticed before because they've moved out of the country, and you guessed it, they're doing a side gig, and you guessed it, it's not reported income, and of course, it's of interest. Okay. Next thing that I want you to consider related to this are questions about unreported work. Questions about unreported work. When you think about unreported work, a lot of you guys are like, oh, it's that nefarious person working through the night. It's not usually that. What it usually is somebody gives you a job that's a buddy. And then all of a sudden, the SSA is trying to track down who the buddy is. Why? So you'll be talking with your doctor. Your doctor will strike up a conversation with you, or the receptionist will strike up a conversation with you. And then all of a sudden, you're talking about something that the SSA is very interested about. And this is a newer thing that they're looking at more aggressively, as what are the ties that you have to different vocations. So let me give you an example real quick. Let's say that your buddy hires you to do some side work and they pay you, let's say, I don't know, $300, $400 a week to go ahead and do this job. Well, they're going to be wondering why all of a sudden you, with capacity to go ahead and buy all these different things when your bank account only has this much, and yet all of a sudden there's all these deliveries to your house, and it does not look like you're having a reduction of essentially what you had in your bank account. So one of the things you kind of have to keep in mind related to this is they're trying to find ways to see essentially if you are somehow receiving funds from somebody else. If it's an SSI thing, they'll try and do the 1/3 reduction rule called in-kind support maintenance rule. If it's an SSDI thing, they're going to be looking at the SGA situation. Because remember, $1,620. Again, $1,620 means that you are no longer eligible if you earn that from regular income, essentially from other employers. Then you can't get your benefits. So if we take 1620, that's the amount, and divide it by 4, because it's usually 4 weeks to a month, you get about 405 buckaroos every single week. 405 buckaroos every single week. You earn over that, guess what? They're going to be very, very interested, because then you are committing fraud on Element 1 SGA, and you shouldn't be receiving disability benefits. Real quick, thank you to Princess Diana for the $5 donation. I super appreciate that. I will definitely get them some treats. That's absolutely awesome. Also, Tasty Tracy, thank you for the $1.99 donation. Love it, love it. Very, very cool. Let me put a heart right there. That's awesome. Okay, so another thing to keep in mind is that if you get a specific letter from OIG, which does not happen often, it might come from an agent. Basically, what will happen is it will go into some detailed questions, or it will make some comments about things that they've noticed, or it'll go into essentially things that they want to learn more about, or it'll be a statement. It'll be a statement from them pertaining to things that you're going to have to respond to. So that is like the definitive, you're being investigated, it's coming from OIG, etc. Sometimes it comes from a different part of the federal government. So, classic criminal investigation, stuff like that. Have I represented people who have been in that situation? Have I had claimants who, the other attorney on behalf of the federal government would call me and say, hey, look, here's the evidence we have, da 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 da. Yes, it is. It's a very spicy situation. Next one. All right. So let's say that one of these investigators essentially comes and knocks on your door and asks you a bunch of questions. They might tell you who they're with. They might not tell you who they're with. They might create a ruse, which is where they'll lie to you, so long as they don't create a writing in furtherance of that lie. Like they present you a document that makes that lie more believable, more direct. So in that situation, what happens is this: basically, they'll come and they'll ask you questions, and then you'll know de facto you are being investigated. Because if it's somebody asking questions that are kind of like on a surface level, but it's some random police officer or some random sheriff or some random agent that shows up at your house, you're going to be very suspicious, and it's good that you are, because that is an obvious, very, very straightforward thing where a CDI unit is very likely to be investigating you. All right, let's say that you call the SSA and you keep getting really, really, really vague, really just unknown, really just, like they're not really telling you anything new, updates on your claim. Now, obviously, the government is closed right now. You know what I mean? It's October 7th right now. So the bottom line is the government's closed. So you're going to call them, and there's not as many people working. They lost over 6,000 people through this furlough situation. They just came out with a new document that basically is stating with legal scholars that people who are furloughed don't necessarily have to be paid for the time in which they're not working, although traditionally they've done that. So that's going to get very spicy. But the bottom line is this. At the end of the day, just to be very clear with this whole thing, if you call the SSA and you constantly get vague, status updates, or, for example, they will have somebody answer the phone, and then that person will say, one moment, I need to go and check on something. They go away, and then they come back. Many times they're checking with the manager as to what to do because there's some sort of flag on your specific internal ERE system. And when that happens, that's because the flag is telling them, hey, this is a unique claim. This is a unique situation. You're not supposed to talk about this. You cannot send them that, yada, yada, yada. So they basically go and talk to a manager because they don't want to get in trouble for disclosing to you something that you're not supposed to have, potentially where they're investigating you and creating an ROI document. Okay. Next thing is this: if your claim is taking an unreasonable amount of time, like a much longer period of time, that could be because they're going ahead and, basically investigating you. So let's say a claim would traditionally, let's just pick a round number. We're not going to pick like a specific whatever. Let's just say 12 months for an initial filing, right, to adjudicate a claim, yada, yada. So let's say instead of 12 months, it's taking 15, 16 months, which still, it could be a normal claim. I'm just using basic numbers, simple numbers for, because 12 months is a year. If it seems like things are taking an obnoxiously long time, and when you call in, they don't seem to have any movement going, and when you call in, they don't have any movement going, and it seems like you're never really getting a straight answer as to what's going on, and you call different people and you're getting different answers, that could be a sign that OIG has taken the claim and plucked it out of their system and started to work on the investigation portion of it. And then when they're done with their investigation, their ROI goes back essentially to the DDS rep with the ROI. And at that point, the DDS rep uses it to adjudicate it, or the administrative law judge if it's in front of an ALJ. Okay, next one. So let's say, for example, you receive a request from the SSA pertaining to certain types of evidence. Certain types of evidence, such as, for example, bank statements, good old bank statements, pay stubs, good old pay stubs, who was working with you, basically surveillance footage, or something that is really specific that's outside the forms. Then you're getting into the territory where the SSA is looking into something very seriously, and they're looking to find something very serious. So that is a good sign that you may be under investigation from a higher level group, such as the CDI units. Now, with that said, please remember to keep hitting that like button. Please keep hitting that like button. Let's go on to the next one. Okay, so another thing that you should keep in mind is that if you have a lot of stuff on social media, and the social media has date stamps on it, and the date stamps are current to your application process, no longer are the days where you could go ahead and go on a cruise to Jamaica and show a bunch of pictures of you riding horses around the beach, and then basically still claim that you had back problems. No longer are the days where you can do that. The SSA is very good at scraping your profile off the web and seeing what's current, seeing what's going on, seeing what metadata they can actually get. Now, Some of you know what metadata is. It's very simple. Some of you don't. Let me give you the summarized version of what metadata is. The definition of metadata is it's data about data, but that's kind of confusing. And if you don't know what it is already to begin with, you can't really figure that out. So it is data about something normally you use, like uploading a photo. That photo is data. And then that metadata is data that's hidden from you as a part of the user experience. So that when you upload it, it also collects, file size, who uploaded it, what IP address uploaded it, what's unique about the photo. Are there issues with the photo? Was there a codex used on the photo? That's all metadata. It is data about the photo that you can't see but can be scraped from the internet. Okay. Let's talk about another thing real quick. Okay. So let's say that you go to a local store and the local store was recently interviewed because somebody stopped by to ask questions about you. A very, very, very good sign that an OIG SSA CDI unit agent likely popped by to ask questions about you. Okay. Now, another thing too is if the SSA is very aggressive with basically going and submitting, essentially 827 forms or HIPAA forms. If it looks like the SSA is asking for a lot of updated 827 forms, or different groups within the SSA are asking for an updated 827 form, that's a very interesting scenario. The 827 is your HIPAA. They send it out to collect evidence to try and bring documents in. If a judge is going to go ahead and subpoena something, that's when the 827 has failed. But the bottom line is, just so you know, if it looks like different divisions are trying to request an 827 from you, a HIPAA form from you, that's also a good sign that they're looking into something very, very deeply. Okay. Now, next thing, let's talk about this. Let's say that you find out that your family members have been interviewed. Let's say that your family members who live in another place had somebody show up and ask questions about you. Now, this could be anything, but realistically, if you're applying for disability benefits, it's probably, in all likelihood, going to be an SSI CDI agent who's asking more questions about your hobbies and things like that. If they interview family members, they're usually not going to start with the best one in the equation because they don't want to scare the individual, or they'll go directly to the best person, which is the one that hired you to do a job that's now hidden, because they want to get the information first from that person to see what the response will be. It depends on the situation. Sometimes they don't want to scare the scenario. Sometimes they want to scare the scenario. So you have to keep that in mind. Okay, next one. Let's say that basically you have a car parked outside that has never been there before and it keeps coming back and it looks like a surveillance detail. Now, many of you are not going to be able to know what a surveillance detail actually is anymore because the classic white van is just not what they do. The white van situation is where they have a lot of video screens usually put in it. They have some sort of, satellite system built into it. But no, it's not like back in the day where you have to have like a satellite on top of the van to know that it's sending signals to a satellite up above Earth. That's not how it works. And you should know that because a lot of satellite equipment now is the size of literally smaller than a penny. So the bottom line is it could be anything. They could be operating from inside an excursion. They could be operating from inside of this or that or whatever. But the bottom line is it's got to be something that they have the ability to move around in the back with if they want to do more serious levels of investigation, or it has to be something where they can push the seat back with a modified seat that goes all the way back and do more functions. Some of you may have realized that if you have the front window on your left side not tinted as much, you can see into it. However, they do have these types of plastic things that you can put on windows where it makes it look like basically a seat on the inside, but there's not actually, you can't see past it. You can't see what's going in. So it's one of those things. It's really cool tech. But if you look up basically these invisible shields and invisible plastic type of materials that they can put on, it makes it blurry, but you can essentially go ahead and make something look invisible in a certain area if you wanted to. So that does exist. The technology is there. All right, let's talk about this. Let's say that basically you had all of a sudden a situation where you were at the hobby where you like to go do stuff. So let's say you have a habit of going and playing mini golf, right? And then all of a sudden you're seeing the same person at a mini golf number one and then mini golf location number two. That's not, indicative evidence of definitive, blah, 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 but it is a good sign that something's going on because nobody goes to the same mini putt golf place twice unless the extreme situation occurs where you're part of like maybe a club or something. But bottom line is this, that it was very, very, very odd situation. Another thing that is really, really definitive of this is a really good one, is that if the SSA all of a sudden is sending you to more CE exams. So let's say they send you to a CE exam And then a year or 2 years down the line, they send you to another one, and it's not part of the standard reconsideration system. So let's say that, you go through the initial filing, you do your CEs, you go to recon, they don't send you to CEs. Then you go to the ALJ hearing, but before the judge even really interacts with it, before a judge is even assigned at the OHO ALJ hearing level, they're requesting, demanding that you go to new CEs. That is one of those things that is highly, highly likely that you are in a situation where unfortunately you're probably being followed by CDI units. And let me explain why. The number one classic thing that CDI units will use to investigate you, and it's all over the internet at this point. It's everybody knows this. The classic thing they do is they set up a mandatory medical examination, and then they tell you you've got to be there, you've got to go to it. And from the day you start, the moment you start, they are outside your house capturing footage. They're capturing you leave your house. They're capturing you go to the appointment. They're capturing you arrive at the appointment. They're capturing you leaving the appointment. They're capturing you going to a different thing. And remember, they're not always limited to just one vehicle. A lot of people in their head, for some reason, it's like they're only going to have one vehicle. They're only going to have one blah, blah, blah. No, 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 no. They can have one vehicle at one location and another vehicle at another location because, look, if you notice the same vehicle, anybody who's seen a classic 1980s, New York, New Jersey, paint the walls, movie, they're going to know. But the bottom line is they can have different vehicles in different locations, and they can go ahead and, collect their data. And the main thing they're looking for is video footage to show your capacity to do walking, lifting, pushing, pulling, kneeling, etc. All right. So another thing that I want to go through that I think is important. If you have a feeling, right, but you're an anxious person and you have depression, it could be nothing. It could, because you remember, a lot of people have panic attacks and they're built to automatically have this schizophrenia, schizoaffective kind of existence where they get all like hyped up, like real hardcore hyped up. But the reality is it could be nothing. It could be absolutely nothing. It could be just, your impairment playing tricks on you. And that's fine too. It is what it is. Like, you are who you are. But if you notice these things that we just went over, then I would say it would be a good idea to kind of keep things in mind. Now, if you find things attached to your vehicle, if you find things that are in your yard that were never there before, and they're things that, look odd, but they're things you wouldn't necessarily pick up. I mean, look, there's all kinds of spy techniques out there. Not that the SSA goes to this, because they have to actually create the gear that they go ahead and administer to the agents that come and, yada, yada. But, it's not, it would be conspiracy level theory. It would be at that level, conspiracy theory stuff. If like you had an acorn that was in your lawn, and you have an acorn tree and it just didn't look like it came from that tree, it would be falling into more of that conspiracy level stuff. But at the same time, there are instances where they absolutely do use spy tech on people. Let me explain why. When the SSA OIG begins its investigation, usually the investigation is like, hey, we're just trying to figure stuff out. But it can evolve into an investigation that involves more individuals that are part of the Justice Department looking to go ahead and claim fraud. When you get those people interacting with the situation, you get those people involved with the situation, then you're going to be seeing more high level tech. You're going to be seeing not just your classic SSA, organized setups for, here's your cameras, they usually have 2 cameras on them. Here's your audio devices. Here's your this, here's your that, blah, blah, blah. You're going to be seeing all kinds of tech. So some of you would say this, look, at the end of the day, you believe you're a truly disabled person. You don't think you're doing anything wrong. That's excellent. They're probably not going to bother you. However, I just want to point out, with the climate as it is, and remember, there's no proof of this. There's just 3 people who anonymously went to the Washington Post. All right. At the end of the day, what you have to keep in mind is that when Donald Trump becomes president, you see, there's many ways to fix the trust fund. You can not fix it and just reduce the amount of people taking from it. Then it's fixed. You can fix it financially, create separate, investments, stuff like that. And then at that point, you can have it make lots of money. Because, just to be fair, government people, government workers, excluding the politicians, government workers are super shitty at knowing how to make money. They're not great at investments. They're not great at like this. They're not great at that. They are super shitty at how to make money. Okay. Kind of like me. And so as a result, you know what I mean? They're not making huge plans with huge this and huge that to make tons and tons of money. Whereas to make something very clear, the politicians, you've noticed, have made a lot of money very quickly. The politicians, and some of you think they're total idiots, and many of them are. And I know we're going to see, look, I'm not going to talk about anyone that was recently vice president, but I'm just saying, like, when you can't finish a speech or have sentences that make sense, that's not a good situation for being able to competently explain what your brain is trying to tell your mouth to tell other people. But again, right. So my point here is this, okay? And even those people, presidents, vice presidents, senators, House reps, they all have financial management people. Like, a lot of you don't realize that, but there's an entire team of people that basically support, these politicians with their money growth potential. There's an entire group of people that do that stuff. So there's an entire industry of people that just support the money growth potential politicians to gain massive amounts through anything, writing a book, speaking engagements, putting their signature on something, whatever. All right. So with that said, I want you to understand that this is not meant to make you scared. It's just meant to give you examples of when there's probably somebody looking into your claim. Now, remember, there's many levels of looking into your claim. But before we go into that, please remember, I don't do Medicare stuff. If you want to have a checkup on your Medicare, like a tune-up on, your plan, give them a call. It's Chapter, askchapter.org/disability. I'm the only one with this cool little thingy right here because obviously America's most viewed. Subscribe to Clicked On Disability Attorney. Also, if you need a disability attorney, 9 to 5, give me a call. 339-226-6287, free Medicare. And what it is, it's they basically, you call in, they figure out if you got a great plan, they walk you through what your options are. It's literally free. So if you have, Medicare or Medicare Advantage, you want to see if you've got a really good plan, check in with them right here. They save a lot of people a lot of money. So anyway, do that. All right. With that said, I want to go through something else real quick. All right. When it comes to, investigations, sometimes people will misunderstand the level of investigation going on and whether or not it's normal. Having the SSA send out forms like a 3373 about what you do at home, whether you can take care of other people, whether you have pets, totally normal. Having the SSA send out a 3369 about, what jobs did you do? What'd you do at them? Were you a boss? Were you a lead worker? What'd you do? Right? Totally normal. We get to the 820, 821s. We're starting to get into the, there might be a problem here situation. That's where they want to know specific details about what you earned where. Could be nothing, but you start getting those, you're on track for a potential investigation. So you just kind of have to keep that in mind. So, all right, with that said, we've gone through quite a few here. I hope you enjoyed the video. I'm going to be going live in a little bit later. I did take a quick shower before we did these videos because when I have a couple hearings in a row, I get a little sweaty, but I'm good to go. Attorney Walter Hnot, the most viewed, subscribed to, and clicked on disability attorney in America. Please remember to hit the like button, and subscribe. Also, head over to Google, type in Disability Resolution Law Firm or Disability Resolution Florida. Go ahead and throw some stars up there if you want to. We will be going live tonight to answer questions for free. And also, if you need a private session for a 30-minute or 60-minute, there is a little link in contract in the bio below, a mini contract for the private sessions. I will catch you all a little bit later. You have a wonderful, wonderful day, and I will see you later tonight. Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everybody. Bye-bye.